Tingles with flyby. Hello my tinglings, and welcome to this series of videos that I started when I discussed why I left Mormonism. That was a very personal video talking about kind of my personal journey through Mormonism, but I did a lot of contemplation and investigation after I left the church for my own personal reasons and found some interesting things. One of the most interesting, things I found was this list that said, I thought it was 12 signs of a destructive cult. I haven't been able to find the exact thing that I read at the time again, but I found this list, which is 15 signs of a destructive cult, and yeah. So I'm going to go through the list and kind of explain each point and which points I think apply to Mormonism, and then I'll give you my understanding of that. So the first sign is zealous, unquestioning commitment to the leader. And I think Mormonism definitely has this. There is both Joseph Smith as the founder, and there was definitely that sort of environment created when he started the church. And then there is that continuing presence to a little bit lesser extent, but continuing to the current day prophets, where basically if the prophet says something, it is law. And while you may be allowed to question it, this is something you'll see as a continuing thread throughout this list, is that there's kind of a surface level lip service to being able to question the prophet, but basically they tell you how to question the prophet. So if you don't believe what the prophet has said, then you are supposed to go and pray for your own understanding, and then, well, if your understanding doesn't match what the prophet's is, if you express that loudly, if you express that clearly, if you try and get people to agree with you, then you can be considered apostate and you can be kicked out of the group, depending on what the issue is, such as Kathleen Kelly with wanting women to be ordained to the priesthood. So I definitely think that it's a big tick mark. The Mormon Church does apply to that, while paying lip service to not. Number 2, questioning, doubt, dissent is discouraged or punished. And again, there is a lot of lip service given into the church that, oh, it's okay to have doubts, it's okay to have questions. But again, if you're acting on these questions, or you're trying to have rational discussions, then it's not really a safe space for them, because it's always this perception of, well, are you going against the prophet? Are you going against your priesthood leaders? Are you not doing what you're supposed to do? And if you're not, then you could be subject to a disciplinary hearing. And so you're allowed to question, but only in particular ways. You're allowed to question in your prayers and in your thoughts, but not really vocal questions, and not on really key or divisive or important issues. More, it's okay to be having doubts that are okay to have. And if there's any sort of limit on that expression of doubt, dissent, or questioning, then I don't really think that you're actually allowed to question, dissent, or doubt at all. Now, if you're thinking about like a suicide cult, obviously it's not as extensive as to that level. There's obviously a gradient with these sort of things, and so I wouldn't say that Mormonism is the worst in this particular area, but it's definitely not good in this area. I don't think everything's black and white, but I do give that a tick. Number 3 is mind-altering practices used in excess. So this is speaking in tongues, excessive chanting, that sort of thing. There's not really a lot of that in Mormonism. There is some in temple ceremonies, but that is, I mean, for yourself, it's only once in your life, and then it's kind of up to you if you go back and do that again. So I don't actually think, not really at all. Only in the way that kind of all religions do, with thought-terminating cliches such as the Lord works in mysterious ways and that sort of thing. But I don't think that there's anything really that sinister in that area for Mormonism, so I'll give you an X. First X for Mormonism. The leadership, number 4 is the leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. Again, there is lip service to this, and there is real. I'd say this is a very kind of mixed bag. There are certain things that are very restrictive, so what women and men are supposed to wear, because you're supposed to wear garments, and there's a high amount of judgment. Lots of people will say that's not their religion, it's the culture, but religion is culture, so you can't really divide them. So the impact that it's having is the impact it's having. If you're not taking anything to change that, then you are complicit in that happening. So, I mean, there is a lot of, what you're supposed to drink, what you're not supposed to drink, what you're supposed to eat. I mean, there's a lot of detail given, but it doesn't all necessarily make sense, so meat is supposed to be used sparingly. Well, okay, that's not super specific. So, I mean, I don't think, again, on a spectrum, I don't think it's way over here. I don't think it's super extreme, but it's more than I would like to be told what I should be doing. And especially about very personal things like masturbation, or what you wear, when you have sex, who you should have sex with. Obviously a lot of religions have things about that. Don't think that really excuses it. But yeah, what you wear is also seen, but that's only if you've taken your higher covenants. But, I mean, that's like, if it's any high level, then it has an impact. So, again, I think it's more towards the middle, so I would give it a kind of maybe on that one. Number 5 is the group is elitist, claiming special, exalted status for itself. This is 100% true. The belief is that you cannot attain the highest level of the celestial kingdom in the afterlife, which nobody has seen, heard, had any interaction with, except, by claims that can't be verified. But anyway, to be able to get to this particular area, you must follow the gospel and do everything in, these particular ways, or, Jesus will save you, that sort of thing. And so it's so elitist that not only is it that just, okay, yeah, we're the only ones who are going to get there, it's that even, let's say, if you had a really good person in life, I won't say Mother Teresa because she has a mixed bag, but let's say somebody who is just really selfless, a great person, this person would still have to go through the rites of the Mormon Church after their death by proxy on the earth. So you have to go through these things before you could attain this. So it's very exclusive, and you must be a part, otherwise you can't get the best of everything. So, yeah, definitely guilty as charged. Number 6 is a polarizing us versus them ideology. And this one, again, I'm going to put it kind of in the middle. So, kind of in that we're selected idea is the idea that people outside of the church have, how they drink and they use tobacco and, this sort of thing. And so it can be very divisive on that direction. It's not really aggressively us versus them. So it's not thinking, oh, hey, we want to go out and attack everybody else. They do consider themselves Christians, so the idea is that you're supposed to love everybody, but it's kind of like, yeah, I love you, but I'm going to keep my heart in here, type thing. And it's kind of ingrained, and I think it's very subconscious as well. It's something I can kind of feel when I left the church. I'm not in that group anymore, and so my relationships with people in the church have changed. And I know some of that's on my side, but part of that I think is because of that us and them setup within the church. Because if I have a friend who I was in a choir group with, if they leave the choir group, there's none of that, no, on either side. So that sort of structure within the church, I think, is part of what causes that polarizing feel between somebody who's left the church and who's still in it. Number 7 is the leader is not accountable to any authority. And I'm a bit mixed on this one. I'd say, if this is my most extreme and this is kind of not at all, I don't think it's very much. So, very light on, but it kind of depends on what you mean by a leader. There is accountability because you do have a whole structure between, and there are, discipline levels for who can discipline who and that sort of thing. But ultimately, there is a lot that is not subject for discipline that I think probably should. But obviously, there's things like if you were doing something illegal, then you would probably have repercussions through the church, not just the law. So there is accountability in that way. So I would say very little, but on very personal things, there's not a lot of accountability because it's very subjective. Everybody's following the Spirit, and so you can kind of come up with lots of different things. Number 8 is the exalted ends justify shoddy means. So because you have this great purpose, that you can run a bogus charity work, and I don't think there is much of that really in the church. It's pretty above board with what they do as far as legal and kind of moral in that way. I mean, there is a little bit. So, for example, the money that they put into Proposition 8 to fight against homosexuals getting the right to marry in California that led to lots of suicides, particularly of members of the church. I mean, yeah, that I don't think. But anyway, but obviously it's more that's putting your political, that's very on the spectrum of what this is talking about. I'm not saying that that's not a severe outcome, but I'm saying as far as that being shoddy or kind of not acceptable in our society, I think it's fairly acceptable for people to donate money to a cause that they believe in, even if it's not a cause that I support. So I don't think there is that very strong. Number 9 is leadership induces shame or guilt to influence and control members. And I do think that this exists. There's a lot of discussion about imperfection. And I think being imperfect and being reminded constantly that you're imperfect and that you need to strive for perfection, I think that's a form of shame and guilt. And I think that's a form of control, keeping you coming back, because this is the method that's going to show you how to overcome this problem within yourself without really stepping back and saying, well, is this problem something that you've created, or does it actually exist inside of me? But the assumption is that everybody has this problem, that no matter how small your flaws are, that you're a sinner, and that you need to be improved, that you need Jesus, that you need, to be exalted, and that you're not good enough on your own. That messaging, I think, is very damaging. And I think that is something that induces shame and guilt when somebody does something that's against the rules, or against something that they think that the leaders might not approve of, when their own internal moral compass may be fine with that. I am particularly touchy about that one because of my relationship with my son and the experiences I had with that. Because it is not, your most normal, your typical relationship, I'll say. It's quite normal. Lots of people have relationships like that. But yeah, I do think that shame and guilt are used a lot, as they are in a lot of religions, but hey, I'm not advocating for any other religion either. Number 10 is subservience to the leader or group requires members to cut ties with family, friends, alter personal goals after joining the group. And again, I'm going to put this, if we have a sliding scale here, I'm going to put it more towards here. I know that, Jehovah's Witnesses can be very strong on that. They're a lot more over this way. Whereas Mormons are very, no, you should stay with your family and, love the sinner, hate the sin type thing. But that kind of messaging is kind of its own problem, because saying love the sinner, hate the sin is a very distancing type language, and treating somebody as an out-group, and and the thing that I think is most relevant is particularly for example, a non-member coming and wanting to get married, And to get sealed in the temple without having to wait a year, you have to exclude any non-members from your wedding ceremony because they can't go in the temple. And so that can be, while it's on a smaller scale, it's not saying, hey, completely from my life, but that's a very key moment in your life, and so it can be a very massive issue for a lot of people who come into the church. Number 11 is preoccupied with bringing in new members. If there are any Mormons still watching this, you'll know that guilt that you feel every time a missionary lesson comes up, and they are often, and that is because, yes, there is a preoccupation with bringing in new members. It's not seen as just a group that is interested in itself, and we're just, whoever comes in, that's great. It is a group that actively goes out and seeks to spread the word of God, aka go and change everybody else's minds, thinking that you know better than them about how they should live their life. So, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about that, but, well, it's also because it's a very imperialistic attitude. It's a very European attitude, going in and setting up missions, going in and telling people that the way that they're living is not that good. When we bring in these other structures, and these are structures that are damaging the earth and threatening our very species' survival on this planet. So, yeah, I'm not happy about it, because we have decimated populations who know how to live sustainably on every continent, all throughout the land. There have been lots of people who know how to live very sustainably on their lands, and a lot of that knowledge has been lost all across the world. There is still some, and so I think we need to try and embrace these more traditional cultures rather than our imperialist cultures that we have now. And tangent, I don't want to go on too much. So, anyway, big tick with bringing in new members, probably the biggest tick of all. It's part of the threefold mission of the Mormon Church, is to, bring in new members is one of them. Number 12, preoccupied with making money. They would say no. And I'm gonna put it in the middle. I love my little scale I've made here, just anyway, in the middle. Missionary work, you get a lot of talk about. Tithing, you get a lot of talk about. There is a big mechanism to make it so that you have to give 10% of your income to the church. If you are not a member in good standing. So, actually, maybe I should put that all the way to here. That is a massive amount of money to be giving to an organization. It's a lot of money. I've given a lot of money in my life, and I was only working a very short period of time while I was in the church. See, I don't regret I gave donations to the humanitarian fund. The humanitarian fund for the church is run very well. I'm very happy with how that's run, from what I've heard. They are very good about using all the donations, for the good of people around the world and that sort of thing. And the donations go to the people, basically, because they have volunteers throughout the world to institute them. But, in the same token, anyway, won't get into that, but Same token, don't just think that overhead is a bad thing in charities. I'll try and do a video on that one day, but there's also a TED talk on it. But anyway, overhead, not necessarily a bad thing. We need to change our thinking on charities. Okay, number 13 is members are expected to donate inordinate amounts of time to the group. And it's kind of a joke around Mormons that Mormons are always in meetings, but Mormons are busy, and very busy, and asked to do a lot, and beyond that, you're supposed to be praying and studying the scriptures every day for a certain amount of time. It's supposed to be journaling as well. You cannot basically do everything that you should be able to do as a Mormon because you don't have enough time. So I'm going to give that one a huge, massive tick. You have 3 hours of church on Sunday, and that's if you're just a normal member. If you're a bishop or involved in any sort of leadership, you have a lot more time spent in meetings. There is a lot of time required. And then you have visiting teaching to go out once a month. You have your weekly activities or a monthly activity. If you're a high schooler, you have seminary, which is every day. Yeah, it's a lot. Number 14 is members are encouraged or required to live and socialize with other group members. And this I put in the middle. So it's not really a disciplinable offense. You can marry a non-member and everything like that, but it's because it's not by the book, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's kind of not recommended. So it is discouraged, definitely. Because you want to go to the temple, you want to be able to have an exaltation together, and you won't be able to have that if you have your non-member spouse. So it's definitely discouraged. And living with someone, it's kind of like, oh, will you be tempted then to do something you shouldn't do? You know, to have a drink or do something like that. Well, if they're a member, then everything should be rosy. But anyway, and if they aren't a member, then, ooh, it's a little iffy. Are you sure you want to do that? You know, type thing. So it definitely is encouraged. You're encouraged to see everybody because, you know, missionary opportunities, but beyond that, it's not really extensive that you're encouraged to socialize with everyone. And number 15, our final trait, is that the most loyal members feel that there can be no life outside of the group, no other way to be, and they fear reprisal if they or others leave or consider leaving. And you definitely see this in the groups that Mormons worry about those who have left. Continually pray for those who are not in the church. Continually are praying for them to come back to the church. And have a lot of fear and anxiety when people do leave. This varies obviously from person to person. Everyone's an individual. That's no different in the Mormon Church. But I do think that the higher up you go, then the more concerned you are with that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to say. So, I think there is strong evidence, based on my experience and my analysis of what a destructive cult is, that there's a lot more aspects there than I am comfortable with, spending my life devoting myself to an organization that engages in such practices. And for me, obviously, it came more as a feeling that I just couldn't really be myself. I feel so much more myself since I've left the church. I feel so much more free and happy with myself and what I'm doing, much more self-assured. So I think getting rid of those weekly and daily destructive messages from myself has been much better. So if you are interested to know any more about this, I don't know what else I have to say, but if you have any questions, I am certainly happy to answer them. Put them down in the comments. Otherwise, I just want to let you know you are enough just as you are. You don't need anybody else to tell you what you need to do. You can figure it out on your own. And I believe in you. So, have a lovely day. Thanks for watching.